Last night, you were somewhere else. You know you were. You just can't fully remember where. Maybe it was a place that doesn't exist. Maybe it was a version of somewhere you know, but wrong in a way you can't describe. Maybe someone was there who shouldn't have been someone dead, someone you haven't thought about in years, someone your waking brain would never have put in that situation. And then you woke up, and it was gone. We spend roughly a third of our entire lives unconscious. Of that time, we spend approximately 2 hours every single night in REM sleep, the state in which dreams occur. 2 hours a night. Across an average human lifetime, that is approximately 6 full years of dreaming. 6 years in another world that you don't control. That follows its own logic. That produces experiences so vivid, so emotionally charged, so architecturally complex that the human brain cannot always distinguish them from waking life, not during the dream, and sometimes not for minutes after waking. And here is what every civilization in the history of the world decided about this experience. Not some of them, not most of them, every single one. They decided it was not random. The ancient Egyptians built temples specifically so that sick people could sleep inside them and receive healing instructions from the gods. The Greeks had an entire medical system based on dream diagnosis. Patients traveled to sacred sites called Asclepiae, performed purification rituals, and slept in the sanctuary, hoping that the god Asclepius would appear in the night and tell them how to be cured. The Babylonians had professional dream interpreters, Shailu, whose job was to analyze the dreams of kings and nobles and advise on military and political decisions based on what the dreams revealed. The Bible, Old and New Testament, contains somewhere between 20 and 30 significant dreams that directly alter the course of events. God speaks through dreams in Genesis, in Numbers, in Joel, in Daniel, in Matthew. Joseph rises from slave to second in command of Egypt because he can interpret dreams. The Magi are warned in a dream not to return to Herod. The Quran describes the Prophet Muhammad's first experience of revelation as beginning in dreams, al-Ruya al-Sadiqa, the true dream, described as 1/46th of prophethood. The Hindu tradition contains entire branches of sacred knowledge dedicated to dream interpretation. The Atharva Veda, one of the 4 Vedas, the oldest layer of Hindu scripture, has passages on auspicious and inauspicious dreams and what they mean for the dreamer's fate. The Aztecs had a god specifically for dreams. Tepezcuitl, and dream interpretation was practiced by specialists called Tlapahuki, trained readers of the night who could tell you whether your dream was a divine communication, a demonic interference, or a reflection of your own health. The Aboriginal Australians have a concept called the Dreamtime, not a time of sleep, but the fundamental reality underlying physical existence, the layer of being in which creation happened and continues to happen, and in which the living can sometimes participate during sleep. The Norse believed that certain people, vulva, seers, mostly women, could enter a specific state of consciousness during which they traveled to other realms and returned with knowledge. The boundary between this practice and dreaming was deliberately blurred. Every civilization, every tradition, the same conclusion. When you close your eyes and your consciousness goes somewhere else, you are not simply experiencing random neural firing. You are receiving something. The question, the one that separates every tradition from every other, the one that has produced more theological and philosophical debate than almost any other subject in human history, is receiving it from where? Mesopotamia, the first dream on record. The oldest dream ever written down is approximately 4,700 years old. It belongs to Dumuzi, a Sumerian king, and in later mythology, a god, and it is recorded in a text called The Dream of Dumuzi. The dream is terrifying. Dumuzi sees eagles attacking falcon chicks. He sees his milk churns overturned, his shepherd's crooks snapped, his cups falling from their pegs, a ewe and her lambs separated. his sister Geshtinana, who in Sumerian tradition is a goddess of wine, and the underworld interprets it for him. Every image is an omen. The eagles are demons coming for him. The crook is his life. The overturned vessels are his household. He is going to be taken to the underworld. The dream has told him this before it happens. He cannot escape it. This is the foundational assumption of Mesopotamian dream interpretation. The dream is predictive. It shows you what is coming. It does not ask your opinion. You cannot argue with it. The best you can do is interpret it correctly and prepare. The Zikik, Mesopotamian theology, had a specific explanation for where dreams came from. The Ziki, a spirit that existed between the waking world and the divine realm, capable of traveling between them during sleep. Your Zikikwe was something like your dream self, the part of you that could receive divine communications when your waking consciousness was suspended. The gods did not come to you in dreams. You went through your Zikikwe to a realm where divine communication was possible. This distinction mattered. It meant that the dreamer was not simply a passive receiver. The quality of your Zikik, your spiritual fitness, your ritual purity, affected whether you received clear dreams or confused ones. Sick people had disturbed Zikik. The impure received garbled messages. Dream interpretation was therefore also a diagnostic tool. A person experiencing persistent nightmares or distorted dreams was spiritually compromised, and the treatment was ritual purification as much as interpretation. Gilgamesh and the dream that predicted Enkidu. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, the oldest literary work in human history, Gilgamesh's mother, Ninsun, is the dream interpreter. When Gilgamesh dreams of a meteorite falling to earth that he cannot lift but is irresistibly drawn to, she tells him, a companion is coming, a man of equal strength, equal courage, someone you will love as a wife. Enkidu arrives. The dream was exact. The Mesopotamian dream tradition treated predictive dreams as reliable enough to act on. Military campaigns were delayed when the omens were bad. Marriages were arranged when dreams said the time was right. The Shailu, the professional dream interpreters, were not peripheral figures. They were part of the administrative structure of the state. The first dream on record is a death omen that comes true. The tradition that grows from it builds an entire science of the night. Egypt sleeping inside the divine. Egypt did something with dreams that no other ancient civilization did at the same scale or with the same architectural commitment. They built rooms for receiving them. Incubation temples per Ankh. Houses of life were spaces specifically designed for what the Egyptians called incubation. The practice of sleeping in a sacred space with the deliberate intention of receiving a divine dream. You didn't just dream, you went somewhere prepared for dreaming. The preparation was as important as the sleep. The most famous of these spaces were associated with the god Serapis, a deliberately hybrid deity created during the Ptolemaic period that combined Osiris, the god of the dead and resurrection, with the Apis bull. Serapis temples were built across the Mediterranean world and explicitly functioned as healing sanctuaries where the sick slept, hoping for divine diagnosis and cure. The process was called enkoimesis, in Greek, sleeping in. Purification first, fasting, ritual bathing, offerings, then sleep in the inner sanctuary, as close as possible to the god's presence. The god appeared in the dream, sometimes as himself, sometimes through a symbolic image, always with information. The Metternich stele, a magical healing stele from ancient Egypt, describes the god Thoth appearing to Isis in a dream and providing specific instructions for healing the infant Horus from a scorpion sting. The dream is medical consultation. The god is the physician. The information is actionable. What's remarkable about the Egyptian dream tradition is that it was not restricted to priests or kings. Commoners could access incubation. The temples were open to the sick, the grieving, the uncertain. This was democratized divinity. The most direct access to divine communication available to the ordinary person, not through a priest's mediation, not through an expensive ritual that only the wealthy could afford, but through sleep, through something your body did every night, regardless of your social class. The Papyrus of Dreams. The Chester Beatty Papyrus, 3 dating to approximately 1275 BCE, is one of the oldest dream interpretation manuals ever found. It catalogs 108 dream types and their meanings. If you dream that you are eating crocodile meat, you will become a village official. If you dream that your face is beautiful, it is good your position is protected. If you dream that you are looking into a deep well, you will be put in prison. If you dream that you are plunging into a river, it is bad, you will be judged guilty. The manual is practical. It does not explain why the connections hold. It simply states them, with the confidence of a tradition that has been testing these correlations for generations and found them reliable. 1 entry. If a man sees himself in a dream, looking at his own face in a mirror that is ominous, it means he will have a second wife. A second wife is, in context, an economic and domestic complication, not obviously related to mirrors, but the association has apparently held often enough to be included in a professional reference manual. The Egyptian dream tradition was empirical in its own way, not experimental in the modern sense, but observational, comparative, tested across time. The manuals represent accumulated cultural data about what specific dream images preceded specific outcomes. Whether the correlations were real is a separate question. That the Egyptians treated them as real, tested them as real, and built physical infrastructure around them as real, that is historical fact. The Bible, when God stopped using any other method. The Bible is saturated with dreams, so saturated that it's easy to miss how deliberate the saturation is. In the Old Testament, God speaks to people in many ways, through direct appearance, through burning bushes, through thunderous voices, through angels, through prophets. But for non-Israelites, for people outside the covenant, for foreigners, for kings of enemy nations who have no relationship with the God of Israel, the method is almost always the same: dreams. When God wants to communicate with the Pharaoh, he sends a dream. When God wants to communicate with the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar, he sends a dream. When God warns Abimelech, king of Gerar, that he is about to make a fatal mistake, he sends a dream. The dream is how God reaches people who have no other channel open. This is theologically significant and almost never discussed. The implication: while the covenant, the prophets, the law are all restricted to Israel, the dream is universal. Anyone can receive a divine communication through sleep, regardless of who they are, regardless of what they believe, regardless of whether they have any relationship with the God who is sending the message. The dream crosses the covenant line. Joseph. Joseph's story, spanning 14 chapters of Genesis, is the most elaborate dream narrative in the entire Bible. 2 of his own dreams at 17, predicting his future authority over his brothers. The dreams of the Pharaoh's cupbearer and baker in the prison, which Joseph correctly interprets. And finally, Pharaoh's dreams: 7 fat cows devoured by 7 thin cows, 7 full heads of grain swallowed by 7 thin heads, which Joseph interprets as 7 years of abundance followed by 7 years of famine. The interpretation saves Egypt. And not just Egypt, the entire ancient Near East, including Joseph's own family, who comes to Egypt for food and triggers the reunion that the whole story was moving toward. One man's ability to read dreams correctly determines the survival of a civilization. The mechanism of that reading is important. Joseph does not claim the skill as his own. Do not interpretations belong to God? He says in the prison, "Tell me your dreams." The dream is divine in origin. The interpretation requires divine assistance. Joseph is not a dream-reading technician. He is a conduit. Daniel. In the book of Daniel, the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar has a dream so disturbing he wakes from it and cannot go back to sleep. He demands that his magicians and astrologers not only interpret it, but tell him what the dream was, without him telling them first. If they can do that, he will know their interpretation is real and not invented. The Babylonian wise men cannot do it. They say, with impeccable logic, there is no one on earth who can do what the king asks. No king, however great and mighty, has ever asked such a thing of any magician, enchanter, or astrologer. Daniel can do it. The dream is of an enormous statue made of different metals: gold head, silver chest, bronze middle, iron legs, clay feet, which is struck by a rock and collapses. The metals represent successive empires: Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome. The rock, cut without human hands, destroys them all and becomes a great mountain filling the earth. The dream is world history, compressed into one night. What the book of Daniel is claiming, what the entire dream narrative of the Bible is claiming, is that the night is a diagnostic space. That in sleep, without the noise of waking life, without the filters of culture and politics and self-interest, the human mind becomes capable of receiving information it cannot access while awake. Not because the dreamer is special, because the waking mind is too full of other things. The New Testament. Matthew's Gospel organizes the nativity narrative around dreams in a way that is easy to miss when reading casually. Joseph, a different Joseph, Mary's husband, learns about Mary's pregnancy in a dream. He decides not to act on it until the dream tells him otherwise. The Magi are warned in a dream not to return to Herod. Joseph is warned in a dream to flee to Egypt with Mary and Jesus. He is later warned in a dream when it is safe to return. He is warned again in a dream to go to Galilee instead of Judea. Matthew's entire nativity narrative runs on dreams. Every major decision, every major movement of the people around Jesus in his infancy, all of them dream-directed. And then, in the moment of the crucifixion, one of the most easily overlooked details in the entire gospel, Pilate's wife sends him a message during the trial. Have nothing to do with that righteous man, for I have suffered much because of him today in a dream. The wife of the Roman governor, not Jewish, not connected to any covenant, not part of any religious tradition that would make her an obvious candidate for divine communication. And she dreams, and she is right. The dream crosses every line. Islam, the dream, as the last open door. The Prophet Muhammad described the al-Ruya al-Sadiqa, the true dream, as 1/46th of prophethood. This is a precise, deliberate fraction. The reasoning behind it: the Prophet received revelation for 23 years. The period of true dreams that preceded the first verbal revelation, a period in which his dreams proved consistently accurate and literally true, lasted 6 months. 6 months is 1/46th of 23 years. The true dream, in this framework, is not equivalent to prophecy. It is a fragment of the prophetic capacity, a smaller, more accessible version of the divine communication channel that full prophecy represents. And because it is a fraction of prophecy, a real fraction, not a metaphor, it remains available after prophethood itself has ended. This is the theological argument for why dream interpretation remains significant in Islamic tradition even after the Prophet's death. Prophecy has closed, but the 46th part of it has not. The dream remains open as a channel. The 3 categories. Islamic dream theory, developed most systematically by scholars like Ibn Sirin, whose dream interpretation manual from the 8th century CE is still in print and still used, divides dreams into 3 types. Al-Ruya al-Sadiqa, the true dream, a genuine communication from God, often involving the Prophet himself, the angels, or clear symbolic content that carries a divine message. These are relatively rare. Alam, the confused dream, arising from the dreamer's own thoughts, desires, anxieties, and daily experiences. These are not divine communications. They are psychological noise, the mind processing the material of waking life. Hadith al-Nafs crossed with Min al-Shaitan, the self-generated and the adversarially sent. Dreams arising from personal preoccupations, or dreams sent by Shaitan, the Islamic adversary, to cause confusion, fear, or misdirection. The practical implication: not every dream is divine. Discernment is required. The ability to distinguish the true dream from the confused dream from the adversarial dream is itself a form of religious knowledge. Ibn Sirin's manual Tafsir al-Ahlam is one of the most detailed dream interpretation texts in any tradition. Over 1,000 dream images analyzed, contextualized, and assigned meanings. It is explicitly not a simple symbol dictionary. The same dream image means different things for different people, depending on their circumstances, their spiritual state, their relationships. A dream of flying means freedom for a slave, spiritual elevation for a scholar, and dangerous ambition for a king. Same image, 3 completely different readings, because the dream speaks to the specific person, not to a generic human. The dream that changed everything. Islamic tradition holds that the Prophet Muhammad saw in a dream the form of the adhan, the call to prayer, the 5 times daily announcement that is one of the most recognizable sounds in the world, heard by billions of people every day. One of his companions, Abdullah ibn Zayd, dreamed of the same form on the same night, confirmation that the dream was divine in origin and not personal. The adhan was implemented directly from dream instruction. 5 times a day, across every Muslim country in the world, in every time zone, the sound that calls people to prayer was first heard in a dream. Greece, the god who came while you slept. The Greek relationship with dreams was the most institutionalized, the most medically integrated, and in some ways the most practically oriented of any ancient tradition. The Greeks had a specific god of dreams, Morpheus, whose name gives us the word morphine, the drug that produces a state as close to the dream world as medicine can manufacture. But Morpheus was a minor figure. The dream deity who mattered most to ordinary Greeks was Asclepius, the god of medicine, the divine healer, the son of Apollo, who was killed by Zeus for bringing the dead back to life and then deified for the same skill. Asclepius appeared in dreams. The Asclepius sanctuaries of Asclepius, the most famous at Epidaurus, were the ancient world's first hospitals in the sense that sick people traveled to them specifically to receive treatment. The treatment was incubation, ritual preparation followed by sleep in the abaton, the sacred dormitory, where Asclepius was believed to appear in the night and effect healing either directly or through dream instruction. Patient testimonies Iamata were inscribed on stone at Epidaurus. Hundreds of them survive. They are among the most extraordinary documents in ancient history. Nicanora of Sparta was ill for 5 years. She slept in the precinct and was cured by a dream. The gods seemed to cure her throat. After waking, she found herself well. A man had his toe healed by a serpent. He was brought to the temple suffering dreadfully. While sleeping, he had a vision. The gods seemed to apply a drug to his toe. When day came, he walked out sound. Clymenes of Argos, a paralytic. He came to the sanctuary and slept here. He saw a vision. The god struck him with a switch on his back. He was cured. These are not literary inventions. They are testimonials left by real people at a real location, inscribed on real stone, in a tradition that continued for at least 500 years. Whether the cures happened as described, whether what the patients called a dream was in some cases a medicated or hypnotic state, whether the placebo effect explains some portion of the outcomes, whether genuine spontaneous remissions were attributed to divine intervention, all of that is genuinely uncertain. What is certain? People went to Epidaurus sick, slept in the sanctuary, and left claiming to be cured. Enough of them did this, and enough of the outcomes were sufficiently dramatic that the sanctuary operated continuously for centuries and attracted patients from across the Mediterranean world. The dream as medical treatment, the night as operating theater, The god is surgeon who came while you slept. Aristotle's problem with all of this. Aristotle, one of the most rigorously empirical minds in ancient history, wrote 3 short treatises on dreams, on sleep and waking, on dreams, and on divination through sleep. His conclusion was heterodox and carefully argued. Dreams, Aristotle said, are primarily the result of sense impressions persisting in the mind after the stimuli have ended the afterglow of waking experience, processed during sleep. Not divine communications, not messages from outside, mental residue. But then he added something that has bothered philosophers ever since. He acknowledged that some dreams do seem to predict the future. He could not explain this cleanly. His best attempt, because the dreaming mind is undistracted, it may be more sensitive to subtle physical signals, the early symptoms of a disease, before they become consciously noticeable, the faint patterns in recent events that waking cognitive noise obscures. The dream, in Aristotle's framework, is not divine, but it may be acutely perceptive. The dreaming mind, freed from the noise of waking life, may simply notice things the waking mind is too busy to register. Aristotle, the rationalist, ends up in almost the same place as the dream traditions he was skeptical of. The night is more perceptive than the day. The dream time when dreams are not what you think they are. Everything discussed so far treats dreams as events that happen during sleep experiences your mind generates in the night that may or may not carry divine content. The Aboriginal Australian concept of the dreamtime chukurpa in the Anangu language is something completely different, and understanding how different it is forces a reconsideration of what dreams might actually be. The dreamtime is not a time when people dream. It is the layer of reality in which creation happened and continues to happen, the foundational level of existence from which the physical world emerges and to which it will eventually return. It is simultaneously the past in which ancestral beings shaped the landscape, the present in which those beings continue to exist in the land itself, and the future which is continuous with that creation. It is called the dreamtime, partly because early European translators reached for the closest English concept they had for a reality that is real but not physically present in the ordinary sense. Dream was the closest word. It is not quite right. In Aboriginal cosmology, certain people through ceremony, through deep knowledge of the country, through specific practices, can access the dreamtime layer of reality, not just during sleep, through waking ritual, through song, through the knowledge of song lines, the invisible pathways across the landscape that correspond to the journeys of the ancestral beings during the time of creation. Sleep is one doorway, not the only one. What this tradition suggests, what it has maintained for approximately 50,000 years, making it the oldest continuous religious tradition on Earth, is that consciousness has modes of operation beyond the waking mode, that there is a layer of reality accessible through those alternate modes, and that the information available in that layer is not less real than the information available through ordinary waking perception. It is differently real. Modern neuroscience would say that during REM sleep, certain regulatory systems that filter and limit conscious experience are suspended, allowing the mind to make connections, perceive patterns, and access memory structures that are inaccessible during waking. The dreaming mind is less filtered, not less real. This is not the same as the dreamtime, but it is moving in the same direction. The Aboriginal tradition has been saying for 50,000 years that the filtered waking mind is not the only or the most complete version of consciousness. It took Western science until the 20th century to arrive at the same neighborhood. Carl Jung, Neuroscience, and Why the Ancients Might Have Been Right. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist who spent his career attempting to understand the unconscious mind, came to believe that the ancient dream traditions were pointing at something real. Not supernatural, but real. His concept of the collective unconscious, a layer of the human psyche shared across all humans, containing inherited psychological structures he called archetypes, emerged partly from his analysis of the dream content of his patients. Jung noticed that people who had no knowledge of ancient mythology, no exposure to ancient religious traditions, regularly produced in their dreams images that were structurally identical to the symbols of those traditions. Patients dreamed of the world tree, of the divine marriage, of the descent to the underworld, of the wise old man and the young hero. They had not read Jung's books or Fraser's Golden Bough or any comparative mythology. They were not making conscious references. They were dreaming the same images that ancient cultures had enshrined in their most sacred narratives. Jung's explanation: these are not cultural inventions. They are structures of the mind itself, patterns that every human brain generates, because every human brain is built on the same underlying architecture. The ancient mythmakers did not create these images. They found them in their own dreams and visions and recognized them as significant. The sacred stories of every tradition are, in part, the recorded dreams of the people who first had them. If Jung is right, or even partially right, then the question of whether divine communication happens through dreams becomes, philosophically, more interesting than a simple yes or no. Because if the deepest layer of the human mind contains structures that are universal, that every human mind shares, regardless of culture, then the question of where those structures came from is genuinely open. Did they emerge randomly through evolution? Are they the accumulated cognitive residue of tens of thousands of years of human experience, compressed into inherited neural architecture? Or is there something outside the individual mind that generates them, something that the ancient traditions were pointing at, not perfectly, not completely, but with a directional accuracy that their millennia of careful dream observation had earned? Neuroscience. Modern sleep research has confirmed several things that the ancient traditions assumed. The sleeping brain is not less active than the waking brain. In REM sleep, brain activity is approximately equal to waking activity, but the pattern is completely different. The prefrontal cortex, the seat of logical reasoning, self-monitoring, and rational filtering, is significantly less active. The limbic system, the emotional brain, is significantly more active. In other words, during dreams, the rational filter is down and the emotional processing is up. This produces the characteristic quality of dreams: more emotional than rational, more associative than logical, more symbolic than literal, not a degraded version of waking thought. A different mode of processing, one that the waking mind, with its rational filter firmly in place, cannot access. The ancient traditions that describe dreams as a space where the divine could communicate were, in neurological terms, pointing at something real. In sleep, the ordinary filters that shape waking consciousness are suspended, and a different kind of processing becomes possible. Whether that different processing connects to something outside the individual mind, whether the reduced filter opens a window to something the waking mind cannot perceive, that question is not closed by neuroscience. It is simply not yet answered. You slept last night. Your brain went somewhere your waking consciousness cannot fully follow. It built environments out of nothing, populated them with people and animals, an impossible architecture, generated experiences so emotionally complete that your body responded to them as real. Your heart rate changed, your muscles tensed, your eyes moved, tracking things that existed only in a darkness inside your own skull. And then it ended, and you woke up, and the edges of it dissolved before you could catch them. Every civilization that has ever existed has had that same experience. Every one of them looked at it and refused to believe it was nothing. The Mesopotamians built a science of prediction from it. The Egyptians built temples for it. The Hebrews made it the channel through which God reached the unreachable. The Greeks built hospitals around it. The Islamic tradition made it the last remaining fragment of prophecy. The Hindus encoded its symbols into their deepest sacred texts. The Aboriginal Australians built their entire cosmology on the insight it provides, that waking consciousness is not the only way of knowing, and the layer of reality accessible in sleep is not less real than the one accessible while awake. What was every one of them responding to? 6 years of your life, spent in a state your waking mind cannot explain. 6 years of experience that feels, while it is happening, exactly as real as this moment. 6 years of somewhere else. Maybe it was random. Maybe the neural correlates of dreaming will eventually be fully mapped, and everything will be explained without remainder, and the ancient dream temples will become pure archaeology, and the papyrus of dreams will be a curiosity of a less informed time. Maybe, but the history of every civilization that has ever tried to study consciousness, from the Babylonian dream interpreters to the neuroscientists in their sleep labs, is the history of a consistent finding. The mind, at its edges, is larger than the waking mind knows. What is at the far edge of that largeness? What waits in the part of consciousness that the waking filter has never reached? Is the question that every dream, in every tradition, has been trying to answer. And none of us, in any tradition, has made it all the way there. Not yet.